So yeah, thanks a lot all for joining. And as Corinne said, if you have any questions, just interrupt me and we can get going. So I'll be giving you a quick tour on 4.1 features and stuff that's new. 4.1 came out last Tuesday, and we've gotten already quite a lot of stuff around it covered. So the official blog on Neo4j.com just talks a little bit about like 4.1 features, role-based access control, clusters, and query planner and memory management, and that's it. So it's very high level and not so informative. What I like personally much more is the release notes. So in the release notes, we get actually more detail here. So we see like this. I'll also use this a little bit on as my cheat sheet to not forget anything. So if you go to neo4j.com/release notes, and then you find Neo4j for one here, and then you can see this in more detail. And if you really want to have the nitty-gritty details, there's also an engineering changelog, which has even more stuff in there and with more details, which is what I actually recommend everyone to read through as such. So which we'll also look at in the end, that we didn't forget anything. So what else? Our team, developer relations, started to put out already some articles and guides around 4.1. And thankfully, Jennifer put up this Neo4j database page, which is new, which you can find on our Neo4j Graph platform. And what we plan to do is have for the different releases of Neo4j. So for once, she put up a little table about like LTS versions. So it's similar to Koji's table that you added to Wikipedia, I think. So just for the LTS versions and the last two STS versions. And then what we plan to do is kind of for the different releases, we just want to collect all the content that we create from DevRel into one place so you can really quickly find stuff around this in one place as well. So here's the things for 4.1, and then here's all the stuff that we did for 4.0 before in January, right? So if you ever want to look up these articles, just go to the Neo4j database one. And something that's really cool is this time, the engineers actually put together a playlist of short videos where you can have all kind of different features explained by the engineers that actually built it. So it's, if you go to YouTube, Neo4j playlists, then you can find there not just the playlists of like graph visualization, Twitch sessions, intro to Neo4j, and so on, but and GraphQL ones, but here's also the Neo4j 4.1 features engineering takes, which is basically the set of talks from the engineers, which is really cool. So I definitely recommend you to watch these, because this is kind of from the engineers that built these. To get Neo4j for one, you either get it via Download Center, as you know. There are also Debian packages and Yum packages. If you haven't seen that, the Debian and the Yum repos moved from neo4j.org to neo4j.com. So if you might get a question about someone not finding their Debian package, then please direct them to the debian.neo4j.com or yum.neo4j.com for RPM packages, which has changed. And here you get these. And now also Docker always takes some time to update the official Docker images, but now 4.1 is also available as Docker image, so you can just do a Docker run Neo4j, and that will start the latest 4.1 version as well, or for one enterprise if you want to as well. So Docker is also available, which is really great. And with that, we can get started, kind of just to give you an overview. And what I want to do is basically use desktop. Oops. I basically just want to use desktop to create a database, local database, and we just call it 4.1 Ninjas and give it a password. I already downloaded it, so it's now in the drop down here, and you can select it. So it can create the database. And with this database, with 4.1, you can already use APOC. So there's already an APOC release available for 4.1 that Mark released last Wednesday, and which is really nice. And the graph data science library 1.3, which comes out in next week or in 2 weeks, it's also compatible with 4.1, but it's not yet in desktop. So if you want to install this, you need to go to the download center. Oh, yeah, I already have it here. You have to go to this download center, and then under Graph Data Science Library 1.3 preview, you find the 1.3 version that's compatible with 4.1. So I just installed Epoch, so now we can actually start our database. And I still have a database somewhere running, and I just need to kill this one. Let me just kill this one. Because I don't remember where I started it, so just get rid of this. Gone. Come on, yeah, okay. So again, I start the desktop database here, and after a few seconds, it should be available. What's a bit changed in desktop is now you can't open browser here anymore, so you have to go back and start browser with this. But what I actually prefer to do is you can just press Command K or Control K to open the quick start menu in desktop, and then you can start any commands. For instance, if I want to start like Euler, or if I want to start browser or Bloom, or if I want to stop the current database or start a database, or if I want to go to a Twitch project or something like that, then I can do this. Or even if I want to see desktops logs files, then I can also do this. So Command K, Control K is super helpful, because from anywhere in desktop you can start all kinds of stuff. So I just start browser from here, and basically I have now my 4.1 database, which is empty, nothing in there, and you see it's Neo4j 4.1. And so let's see what has changed. Quite a lot of stuff has changed. The one thing that's quite nice, which I really like, is that you don't need to switch to the system database anymore to create databases. So for instance, if I want to create a database movies, I can just create the database movies from here. And behind the scenes, the so-called Neo4j router, database router, takes care of rerouting DCL statements to the system database. For instance, I can also do show databases, which shows us all the stuff. And we can also, in 4.1, there's a new feature that allows us to only select a few columns. So for instance, I can select name and current status. If I only want to see 2 columns, and I can also filter. So for instance, I can say where name contains O, and then it only shows me the 2 databases that contain O. So I can now do some more filtering on the system database commands, right? So I can also do this with roles, for instance. If I only want to see the roles, then I can do the same. So it doesn't have a status. And then, oops. I can do this as well, right? What? Show roles. And only edit has an O in there. Speaking of roles, there's a new role called public role, which is new in 4.1. This one here, which everyone gets assigned to, except if you upgrade from a 4.0 database. But if you create a new database in 4.1, then you get or new DBMS in 4.1, you get a public role. And the idea with the public role is that you can assign default privileges to this public role. So for instance, if you want to have every user to be able to, for instance, list and kill transactions, which is also a new permission, then you can assign this to the public role. So for instance, I can do a grant. So now I have to look it up, basically, because I always forget the syntax for database operations. So fortunately, Adam did a really good blog post on role-based access control in 4.1. So that I really recommend a lot. So he covered it in all detail. So if you want to learn more in detail about this, not just high level, then I recommend that you look at this. And
Michael, someone asked if public being in all caps is an intentional design decision.
I don't know why it's in all caps, to be honest. It's kind of weird because the other ones are low caps, and I don't know. I think for
Okay, yeah.
This is Mike French who was asking the question.
But I can take this back. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of really weird. But
I could easily see messing that up on a match.
totally right. So it's I don't understand this either. I'll ask them about it. Why this is different from all the other roles. So what you can do is you can now grant more privileges. So for instance, there's like name management, for instance, which is creating labels, relationship types, and property keys. You can grant all graph privileges, and then you can do also stuff like you can grant management of indexes and constraints as well to someone. So if someone doesn't have the permission, then they can't create indexes or constraints, for instance. And there's DBMS privileges, and then what I wanted to show you is grant transaction management privileges. So for instance, if I want to take this, then I can grant this to public, and then every user can list and kill transactions, basically. Right. Actually, let's see if this actually works. No, it doesn't work. Good catch, right? So it's completely pointless, I guess. Anyway, so and now I can basically, as a public user with a public role only, I could do things like DBMS list transactions. Come on. List transactions, and then basically you can also kill transaction. What actually is nice, I don't know if you've already noticed, you can, initially you could only list queries like this, but now you can also list transactions and also list connections. So you also can see client connections from Bolt as well. And then you can kill them as well, right? So for instance, if I have a connection somewhere that's ongoing, then I can kill this connection as well. So for instance, if I go into my Cypher shell, into my Cypher shell here that I just connect to, then I call something like epoch util sleep 10,000 or so. And then I call list connections again, and then I see there's one from Java, this one here from the shell, and that's bolt 205. And so if I now do call DMS kill connection bolt 205, then it found the connection, and we see that it's, oh no, it was already over. Okay, let's try this again. Rerun this one, and it's bolt 230. So it found this connection, and it I was too slow again. Damn it. Okay. List connections 245, 43. 243, so it killed it, hopefully now. Yeah, so you see now that the connection is killed, and so you can also kill not just a transaction or a query, but also connection, which is really nice. So, and in terms of permission management roles and stuff like that, something that's also new is that you can change write permissions on property access. So for instance, if you want to permit or deny create, set property, delete, or things like that, then you can basically manage this with permissions now as well. So, and what's nice is you can also do it on individual property IDs. So for instance, you can make certain properties not writable by other people, for instance, right? So, but only by certain people. So, but I won't go into details here. You can try this out yourself. Cool. Something else that's new is for one is memory management. So Cypher has much better memory management now. So what you can do is the following. If I go to my movies database and create a movie graph. Let's try this. Come on. And just run a query like, I don't know, anything, match person acted in movie, return p, m. And if I profile this, then I see in the different operations actually also memory information. So you see like this is 64 bytes, and then there's like in total it's 512 bytes that it took, right? So so that's kind of this produced results took another a bit of data. So if I want to create more, I could probably see if I can just take people and again people. So just a cross product and then just return collect p or something like that. Or let's not return it so that the browser doesn't die. Just let's use it in between. Size people. So if you run this, we should see, okay, there's this cross product, Cartesian product, 17,000. And you see that it takes 1.2 megabytes of memory to create this collect statement here, right? And actually in a shell, in the Cypher shell, we also see this in detail when I run a profile there. Oops.
Mike Frank said adding mem usage was a great addition to the profile.
Yeah, it's definitely super useful. I also show you in a second how you can use this as well. So here in the shell, you now see also like memory usage in here. But actually, what's interesting is that it doesn't show the memory usage on the collect as it did here, which is really interesting. So either we found a bug or that's interesting. Okay, cool. What I wanted to show you is actually that Mark wrote an article about the memory management. So if you go to the Neo4j database things, then you should somewhere, I thought at least. No, it's not there yet. So we can, I think it's in administration, memory management. And so Mark explains a little bit how you can use this. And what's interesting is that you can basically configure how much memory is usable either globally per database or per transaction. So for instance, if you want to limit this per transaction, we just take this and add it to our config. Let's say we say 4 megabytes and just save this. Restart the server. And then after it's done, we can try it out actually. So unfortunately, it's the same memory limitation both for read and write operations. So hopefully at some point we will have separate read and write operation memory limits, which will be even better. Come on. And if it reconnects, we should be able to see if we can abort this query, because if you hit a memory limit, it will basically abort the query that you are running, which is really useful if you run Neo4j somewhere in an environment where you don't want the database to get an out of memory error or something like that. So this query should still work, right? So because it's 1.2 megabytes, but if I add like another Cartesian product here, then it should actually abort it. Let's see. No, it doesn't. Why didn't? Oh, it actually aborted the query, right? Or That's really interesting.
Michael's making discoveries.
This is really interesting. Let's see, if you just run it, then it doesn't return anything. Why doesn't it return anything? That's weird. So this is our original query. Oh, haha, because it reconnected to the wrong database. That explains it. It's not the movie database, it's the system data, the Neo4j database. See? So, okay. So this query should now be actually aborted. Let's see. If I run this, it says the allocation of 68 bytes would exceed the 4 megabyte limit because it's currently already using 4 megabytes, so it's aborting the query, right? So it won't run into an out of memory. The same happens if you want to create data. So for instance, if I do like an unwind range of 1 to 10,000 SID create foo ID, I don't know, knows F. So, or let's say 100,000. So, and with 100,000, it tells us this would also exceed our memory limit. With 10,000, it also does it. With 5,000, as well. So let's see, and 1,000 nodes and relationships succeed actually. So it creates, oh shit, I forgot to give it a name here. So that's why it's creating double the node count. So I already actually meant to create 1,000 nodes, 1,000 relationships. But you see that like these memory limits then also kick in for read and write queries at the same time. And if you do a list, call dbm as list queries, you also see there's a column now. It's called estimated, allocated bytes.
Oleg said the error message only shows a B for how much more memory you're using instead of megabyte or gigabyte.
Yeah, it's 192 bytes is more than 4 megabytes.
No, it wants to allocate a 192 byte, and it's currently already using 4 megabytes. So there's like, that's the next allocation that's gonna happen basically. And so which.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Allowed. So, but you're right, the error message could be improved. It says the allocation of 192 byte would use more than the limit basically, right? But you're right, the error message is not as clear as it could be. So we were kind of confused about this ourselves. So you see allocated bytes in the, as allocated bytes here in the list queries and also in list transactions. So if I do also call dbm as list transactions, then I also see allocated bytes in the query, in the transaction, I think. And I think it also lists how many bytes have been used in on heap. So it has estimated used heap and also direct bytes, which is off heap memory, and allocated bytes is heap memory. And the last thing that you can do here is call dbm as list pools, which shows you all the memory.
So Oleg asks, so that's the next allocation then?
Yeah, that's the next allocation, exactly. And list pool shows you all of the memory pools that are available. So there's a bulk memory pool, transaction memory pool, page cache pools, and others. And you see how much of them are actually already in use, basically. Right. So that's also something where you can monitor these kind of things as well. So I think that's it for memory allocation. Oh no, there's one thing that I noticed when I did some testing here. So as you saw here, this query is actually aborted, right? Because it takes more than our limit. But if I only return something like count star, then it will not be aborted because at a given time, the query itself will not allocate more than memory than we have configured, because the operations are not like eagerly allocating memory into a collection, but it only will return the results, which gets a little bit confusing because Cartesian products can go really big, right? So if you turn this actually into a proper Cartesian product, for instance, if I write here something like where 1 equals 1, so it's not just returning the stuff from the count store, but that's a proper Cartesian product. Let's see. Oh no. What do I have to do? B, C, let's see. Something like this. Yeah, right. So each Cartesian product adds 100, multiplies 133 rows times to the power of 3. And so this actually finishes, doesn't allocate more memory. And even if I add yet another dimension, so something like this. So it's basically computing 300 million or so rows. So you see that the query is running, but it's not exceeding the memory allocation. Basically, it's only taking time to do the compute as such, which is really interesting. So that's something that I realized that this does not abort because even if it's long running, it's not allocating the memory, so it's not going into out of memory. So it's like creating 300 million rows, but as they are just streamed through the query engine, they don't allocate more memory, which is really interesting. So in total, this query only took 28,000 bytes, so 28 kilobytes. And I also realized here why it didn't show the DB hits, because you also used the wrong database. So if I run this again, it should show the memory allocation here. So here also you see the improvements in the shell output of profile, which shows us that the original output had much more stuff in here that was not so helpful. So the Cypher team resorted this and moved like the details to the front and added the memory bytes as well. It's also if there's more detail, then they also wrap lines, so it's not exceeding your screen width as well. So you see also that this is the pipeline runtime. So the coverage of the pipeline runtime has been increased. So it's only, I think, 8 operators that are missing right now from the pipeline runtime. And then it has full coverage of 8 operations. And of course, you can change the runtime. So for instance, if you say Cypher runtime equals slotted, then it will use the slotted runtime. If you, like you can see here, if you say Cypher runtime parallel, it will use the experimental parallel runtime, which will parallelize Cypher statements, but which is not officially supported yet. And so you can change the different runtimes. And there's also a new other flag, which is called, which is about query planning. So basically, you can now either force replanning. So for instance, when you know that Cypher should replan the query that you're running, then you can just say Cypher replan force or Cypher replan skip, which is you can enforce this, for instance, in an import when you know that like the volume of data has changed, but the time has not passed yet in Neo4j to allow replanning. So I can say Cypher replan force, then it basically forces to replan. And Cypher replan skip is interesting in situations where you have a really low SLA and you never want it to replan during your hot pass, basically. So it will always be taking the query plan from the query cache and never replan the plan as such. Cool, that's that. What else? Oh, you can also log allocation tracing, which is quite nice. So you also get like the byte allocated bytes into the query log as well. So which is really nice, and you can also log the runtime, which has been used for a certain query. So you, for instance, see is this query handled by the pipeline runtime or by the slotted runtime. So, and the sun is now shining in my face. So this is this stuff. What else did I want to show you? Database router. Oh yeah. So you saw that we can do system commands from any database now, like show users or something like that, right? The other thing that is possible now in this runtime is in this database router is that you can do a use within a Cypher query. So for instance, from the movies database, I can say use Neo4j and then, for instance, run a match statement. And because Neo4j database is still empty, it should actually return 0, right? So you can have one use statement in a query. So for instance, if you are connected to one database, like for instance, here in Cypher Shell, if I'm connected to the movies database and I want to run something somewhere else, then I can just use in the Cypher query without switching in the shell as such. It's kind of a redirecting thing. Something else that happened with this query router was that something was finally fixed that I've been waiting for a long time, which is the following. If you have an query with an read transaction, so this is like the Python 4 driver. So by the way, the Python 4 driver now also supports database selection, multi-database and stuff like that. So if you're using Python, that's quite nice. And it also supports a fetch. I think it's like fetch size or something like that. How many records it should fetch at once. So, but what is really cool, so this is just a simple example that just runs this query. Let me just create this data, so which is basically create database people, and then I can just say use people, and then create person name Alice knows person named Bob, right? So you see I'm still in the movies database, but I still can create data in the people database, right? So let's see if this works. Yep. So now we created this in the people database. So if I check in the people database here, I should have my two people, Alice and Bob, in the database, right? So if I run my Python stuff here, you just have to watch out that you use Python 3 because the latest Python driver doesn't support Python 2 anymore. It's important to not forget. And where's my shell? So this is just Python 3, and I installed a driver with basically pip3 install Neo4j driver, and then it pulls the 4.0 driver, and then I just run Python 3. And if I run this query, it should show me that it returns Bob as the friend, right? So what's now interesting is I said this is a read transaction here, right? So what happens if this query actually sets another property, right? So I turn this read transaction query into a write query, and if I run this again, then I actually get an error because it says writing in read access mode is not allowed. Attempting to write to an internal graph to people, right? So, which didn't work before, but now because of the database router, looking at the queries that are sent to the database and taking care of that, it actually can identify this and take care of it, which is really nice. Okay, what else do we have? Let's see. Oh yeah, I remember. So if we go to our movies database, so Chris West actually said that he added something quite nice to the full text index. So if I do a call full text create node index, give it a name, and then I want to index person nodes, and I want to index movie nodes. Sorry, and I want to index name, title, and tagline. So let's see if this works. Yep. And now what's actually new is, so I could always call like db index full text query nodes here, this one, and pass in the index and add query string, Lucene query string. Hello browser, what are you doing? So I get like these results back, like I get 19 records back. But if I wanted, imagine this was like 1 million records or 10 million records or something like that. Right? If I in the past wanted to filter this, I had to do this in Cypher, where I do like yield node, score, return node dot name, score limit 3 or something like that. Right? So I had to limit it in Cypher. And now I can actually pass this to the search. So I can say skip 3. So it should not return 19 records, but 16. Yep, as you can see here. And you can also do an, I think, limit 5. So it should only return 5 results, which is actually pushed down to Lucene. So it actually uses Lucene to the limit this result. The other thing that Chris also said he did is, if you have a really large index in Lucene, like with many segments spanning like a large volume of data, then he fixed also the score computation. So which is, he said, is not even done correctly in other Lucene using products, and so, but he correctly recomputes the score across segments, which is really nice. Okay, which is also in this changelog here, not in the other changelog, but in this changelog. So that's why, so this is, here, these 2 things, these 3 things here. Cool, what else did I want to show you? Let's see. Oh yeah, so we did memory management, we did pools, I showed you a little bit of DB router, rollback, role-based access control, full text search, subqueries. Subqueries is something that I've also been waiting for a long time. So you know that 4.0 added subquery support for uncorrelated subqueries. So you could do something like post-unit processing. So that means if you do something like match person return count star, person as label, count star as C, union all something like this, to use the count store in both movie, right? So then you couldn't do any post-processing in Cypher before, right? But in 4.0, they added like this call syntax where you can do a subquery. And then basically behind this call, like C and label is available. So you can say return C, label, order by label ascending, for instance, right? So you see I flipped the order and I sorted now by the label. So which is nice for stuff like this, but unfortunately this call in 4.0 couldn't take any previously used information. So for instance, if I have something like with ninjas as Cool. I couldn't use ninjas here, right? So I couldn't return ninjas somewhere here. Sorry, the cool as text. Cool as text. So if I tried this in the past, it just told me that cool is not available, right? But what I can do now in for one is say I can say with cool. So it basically declares which identifiers from the outside you want to use, and then it should actually, let's see, why doesn't it work? Call cool with cool. That's probably I have to do it twice. That's weird.
You might need to alias cool as something else, so maybe a mismatch.
Yeah, I thought it should still work. It's really weird.
You've got a bug on line 9 in your space.
Full return on line 9. Need the space.
Here, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So it seems that in union we need to repeat it twice, which is because these queries are independent of each other, basically. Anyway, so what this allows you to do is really proper nested subqueries. So for instance, if you remember, we can do something like person acted in movie, and I want to return like the person's name and the movie title as a collection, something like that, right? So like the filmography of a person, right? So we can do it like this, which works in this case, okay. But if you have like multiple subtrees that you want to explore, then this is kind of doesn't really work so well, because you have to carry along the different collections and have to kind of pass them through, and then it's still, you have to watch out for cardinality stuff and so on. So what was added in 3.1 was pattern comprehensions, which basically is taking this into an expression. And I could say this person matches this movie. So we basically only match for person on the main query. And then we say this person matches this movie, and we just extract the title of the movie here, and then we have the same basically, right? Which is then, I can do this for any kind of dimension, right? So I could say, for instance, if I was to say I want to differentiate between acted in and produced and directed and so on. So I can then do the different dimensions independent of each other, right? Without doing collect and the other things, right? So basically something like this. Right. So, and if there's no, it's also like an optional match. So if there's no result, then you just get an empty list. Right. So, but unfortunately, pattern comprehensions couldn't do, you could do filtering. So you could do where M title contains an A or something like that, right? But it didn't use indexes or stuff like that. It just did a pure expression-based filtering. So it took every movie and then basically filtered it. But pattern comprehensions are quite powerful. We use it a lot in GraphQL and in SDN, in Spring Data Neo4j, to actually allow these kind of independent subtrees to be fetched from the database without doing basically multiplication of all the cardinalities, right? And what 4.1 now adds is basically subqueries, where we can say we can do this as a separate operation. What I wanted to say is pattern comprehension couldn't do sorting, they couldn't do pagination, so you could do something like this, but this was only after the fact. So it would fetch all the movie titles and then only after the fact apply the slice here, right? And if you wanted to do ordering, you had to do something like epoch call sort or so, right? So, and then use that, which you also had to do in GraphQL. So with 4.1 and pattern, subqueries, this changed. So we can actually now do a subquery, say here with P, and then just do a regular match statement in here, right? So I say person acted in a movie where m.title contains a, so return m.title as title, and then I can just say here, we can also do limits here, for instance, if I want to do limit 2 or something like that. Right, so you have the full power of Cypher in the subqueries as well, and you can also nest them if you want to. And then I can say here, collect title as films. And if I do this, then I get this back. But you could also do the collect here inside, right? So you could also say, do a with here and then just return collect title as films, and then you just return films here. So the subquery does actually do all the nested stuff, and the outer query just gets the result from that. What's important to remember is with the subqueries, if you return something that already exists in the outer query, so if I was to return P here again, then it would complain and I have to alias it to something else. So I have to say, I don't know, SP2 or so, right? And then, so you can't return something that was passed in the same way. You have to alias it or not return it as such. So subqueries is a pretty powerful feature here as well. So I wouldn't, in SQL, I never liked subqueries a lot, but here, because I can do these independent subtrees, it's quite useful for stuff like this. Okay, this was subqueries. What else did you want to look at? Let me quickly just look at my cheat sheet.
Hey, Michael, while you're switching, did you say that pattern comprehensions now use the indexes?
No, unfortunately not.
Filter?
No, they just
they don't. Okay.
But subqueries will use indexes. So if there's an index, then and it makes sense, then the subquery can also now use an index basically here. So if I do a profile,
gotcha. Okay.
If I do a profiler, I don't have any indexes right now, but it should show us like that it runs the subquery independently here. So it actually flips it around, as you can see. So it starts with the movies, I think, and then does an aggregation. Oh no, this is an this is an apply, I think. Yeah. So it pulls it in as parameter. But if I were to say create index on movie title, let's see if the query plan changes. No, it stays a filter, probably because the number is too low.
So, Michael, I don't know if this is the case still, but a lot of the times, if one of those branches is longer, it starts with that at the top, even though using the index or the label scan on movies shows up right there.
Yeah, but that's just a visual artifact, basically, right? So because the subquery is longer, it doesn't mean that it starts with it. So basically, it starts with whatever goes into. So it applies like an operation that puts multiple subtrees together, and this is just a visualization on how the data flows into that. So it's more like a visual artifact of this. So let's perhaps you can just create a bunch of movies, or we can Perhaps you can even force the movie usage here. Let's see, the index user. Using index movie. Does this work? Yep. So you see it does the index lookup here, but still does the apply, which could also have flipped around, which is really interesting. Anyway, so it can do many more optimizations inside of these subtrays as well. So that's quite useful. So let's see what else. Database privileges for transaction management. We talked about database management, so also create database, drop database, user creation, and stuff like that. It's not possible. Also, if you can create permissions, is manageable. Public role, show commands. Rolling upgrades now means that if you have a cluster of 4.0 instances and you want to upgrade it to 4.1, then you can have them running in parallel until all the instances have been upgraded to 4.1, and then roll over with a procedure call basically to 4.1, the whole cluster. We looked at memory management, embedded causal cluster. Some customers or users are still running Neo4j embedded, and now embedded can participate in causal clusters. Cluster leadership control is something that's quite interesting. It's basically you can now request a leader to step down and relinquish its leadership. And so someone else can pick up the leadership of this Raft group, which is also used in leadership balancing. So for instance, each multi-database has its own leader in a cluster. So if you have like, let's say 5 instances and 10 databases, you can now balance it out so that each instance, each machine has 2 leaders running. And so it's actually using that leadership control to achieve leadership balancing. We looked at replanning options, pipeline runtime, I mentioned, so that it's doing that. Explain and profile commands in the shell. We looked at this database routing. Is the use clause in a regular query, a single one. Routing of administration commands. We looked at server-side routing for read and write queries. We looked at like when it fails. And so it's also in a cluster. When you accidentally send a write query to a follower, then it will still be rerouted to a leader automatically. And then there's a bunch of bold configs. Oh yeah, bold has a keep alive message, which will be used to avoid killing connections from cloud load balancers. So for instance, if you have load balancers, this kills the connections after 60 seconds or so. But Neo4j and bold is still running, then it sends basically keep alive packets from the server. And also those keep alive packets also use whatever is in the outgoing buffer. So if, for instance, if already like 2 or 3 records have accumulated in the buffer, then it actually uses these already accumulated results to send them to the client as well. And that's mostly it. So migration guide for enterprise upgrades are here, and also listed here in the details. So anything we missed in the detail change log, some bug fixes, inline levels, fine-grained writes.
Yeah, Mike and Oleg, if you guys want to ask questions, you guys can ask questions out loud instead of like writing in the chat. So Michael can see it.
Oh, there's a DB ping procedure that I think it's used by Bloom for just checking if database is available. All the table, planning, descriptions, access spec. I think we covered most of it or all of it that's relevant. Yep. Bunch of browser improvements that you've already seen probably.
Questions?
So that's it from my side. If you have questions, please shoot. Otherwise, please try it out and let us know if there's something that we can do better and handle better.
Questions. I know people have questions.
I know this was a lot of stuff, but you can also watch the recording if you want to see like any of the details as well. Again. No questions?
You covered everything so well that no one has any questions for you.
Did my
Completely
best.
flabbergasted.
Yeah, sorry. We had only 1 hour. We had only 1 hour, so I had to go quick. Yeah, but you can watch it again in 2x.
Yeah. And do some subliminal programming of my mind. Yeah, sure.
Feeds directly to your matrix, basically. Brain.
Does anybody have any questions that's like not related to this? So you just want to ask things that are burning, that are just random things? You could ask anything. Take advantage of it.
I had one question that's still related to like the upgrade of like 4.0 and 4.1. It was something that I was working with on getting the Neo4j running on a Raspberry Pi, and it had something to do. I was talking with David Allen regarding auto-generated SSL certificates. Something I have to flesh it out a little bit, but I might follow up because I was having some issue where when I started a Neo4j instance where like 4.06 and I couldn't get the HTTPS connection to work, and I seem to be having some trouble with my.
So if you there are some new options in 4.6. So from a driver's perspective, you need to probably use something like here, like encrypted false. For instance, if you use Python, then you would do like encrypted false. If you don't have local certificates, which is I think also the default. But otherwise, if you go to Neo4j developer, then we also added this to the different drivers. Let me see here.
Actually, it was with the Debian was what I was using. So just trying to, and like I think I was trying to set it in the
because there's now this encrypted with self-signed certificates protocol that you can use as well. So Neo4j plus SCC.
Okay.
That could help you on the client side if you use that on.
Okay.
But then it accepts encrypted and self-signed certificates basically.
Okay. All right. I'll take a look at that. I think some of the encryption stuff is a little new, and then.
Yeah, that's why we added this now to the developer guide. So because it's a little bit hard to find in the driver manual.
Yeah, perfect. I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, you can always ping me on Slack or community on Discourse if you have any other questions. Anyway, right?
I will probably have to do that for sure.
Cool. Then, thanks a lot for your time. Corinne, you're muted.
Yeah, I just realized that. So as I mentioned before, if anybody has any ideas or something that you like want to learn more about, that you want me to put into like the future like advanced interactive session thing for Ninja's stuff, let me know because I will put it in. You ask me for it, I will put it in. So
Yep.
It's helpful to know what people want more of, like where you feel like you might be lacking or you need more insight on or whatever. I was thinking about doing one that's
Thank you so much for doing all the helping others and supporting the rest of our community. I very much appreciate that, and it helps us a lot helping all the people that have questions and need some support. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And please let me know when you guys get the messages from